It's good to see you again. And we're going to maybe pick up where we left off. But, one of the things that's on my mind is that, we as a people, we really don't know, just how powerful we are in terms of our history and in terms of our source, in terms of what we have contributed. If I'm trying to remember my dad's quotation that the black skin is not a badge of shame, but an emblem of a great nation, and we don't know that. Everyday parlance, we say we're descended from kings and queens, but we don't have the substance behind it. And what I'm getting at, okay, somehow we know that human beings started in Africa, Homo sapiens sapiens, Lucy and so on, Aldovai Gorge, etc., Ethiopia. But we don't understand how civilization not just started in Africa, but then how it moved around the world. And I wanted to take us through a little bit of that, coming out of Egypt, because there's an original story there where Osar or Osiris, who is a sort of a eponymous ancestor, and after civilizing the rest of us, shall we say, in the Nile Valley in terms of farming and cultivating the vine and making wine and all of these good things as the basis of prosperity for his people, he traveled around the world and civilized the rest of the world. And that's an actual story that handed down generation to generation before writing, from like 10,000 BC on down. But it seems as if there's always an attempt to say that somebody has started civilization before the Africans in Egypt. Like, for example, in Sumer and Elam. Can you take us into that? Because they were called the Blackheads. They call themselves the Blackheads, but so many people have tried to make them out as Semitic. Can you take us through that part of the out of Africa where we're going into the Near East, and then we're going into India and Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, because this is so important, because the ideas of civilization, all started with us.
Greetings. My name is Robin Walker. I'm also known as the Black History Man. I am perhaps best known for my 2006 book, When We Ruled. Based on this book, I'm launching a new online history course aimed at you, the adults. You could be a parent, you could be a teacher, a mechanic, cleaner, professionals, care workers, security guards, taxi drivers, kitchen workers, entrepreneurs, tech heads, lawyers, all of you. We want people from all over the world to be empowered by our content. We want you to gain mastery over your history and heritage. And you can do this by subscribing to our course. Click on the link to get this powerful, life-changing material.
Yeah, let me answer that. What happened in the 19th century when scholars started translating Sanskrit and working on Sanskrit? They realized that Sanskrit really is related to European languages. And so this led to the thesis that India is where civilization started. And the idea that India is where things started was very, very popular in Europe, especially once they were able to link India with what was known as the Indo-European or the Aryan languages. And this led to a supposition of a notion called the Aryan race. And the Aryan race theory was very, very big until one major problem happened. The archaeologists dug up Mohenjo-Daro, Charnu-Daro, and Harappa and realized, oh dear, there were Black folks here before the Aryan conquest. Mm-hmm. And so the scholars then dropped the Indian thesis because they realized that isn't going to fly. So they had to come with another one. And then they tried the ancient Egyptian one, but unfortunately you had people like Sheikh Anta Diop, you had people like Teofilo Benga, you had physical anthropologists, Professor Shomarka Keita, his student, Dr. Keith Crawford. So that really wasn't going to fly either. So scholars had to come with, let's find a civilization that's not in Africa, and let's hope that we can say things started there. Now, Iraq seemed to be a good choice because Iraq is mentioned heavily in the Bible. A lot of people are coming with their King James Version. And so consequently, Iraq was their best bet. And because the modern Iraqis are Semites, you could present the modern Iraqis as the ancient people of the region. And in the region, you had civilizations such as Assyria, going further backwards, Babylonia, going further backwards to Akkadian, going even further backwards to Sumeria. And it was hoped that the Sumerians would end up as Semitic-speaking peoples. The problem is every Sumeriologist knows the Sumerians did not speak Semitic. They all know this. They even call it the Sumerian Problem. Because the question now is, if the Sumerians didn't speak Semitic, what did they speak? And this question has arrested scholars for the longest time. Now, when the discipline of Assyriology, which is the study of the Middle East, started, it started with an English scholar. At the time, he was Colonel Sir Henry Rawlinson. Then he became General Sir Henry Rawlinson. And here's a problem. I've got his stuff. He describes them as Cushites, and then he goes on to say, related not very remotely with the Negro. Did he spot that double negative? Yeah. Not very remotely. In other words, very intimately. And so what then happened is how people dealt with Colonel and then General Rawlinson to make sure that none of that stuff gets reproduced. When I wrote When We Ruled, I went on a major book buying spree to make sure that I could get hold of those books. So the book is called The 5 Great Monarchies of the Ancient Eastern World. It's a multi-volume book, and it's written by Rawlinson's brother, Canon George Rawlinson, who was the professor of ancient history at the University of Cambridge. And what happened is General Sir Henry wrote the essays on the anthropology and all the rest of it. And they're absolutely clear. The very first people in what is now Iraq were Cushites connected not very remotely with the Negro. And so what then happened is scholars then had to find ways of burying that. The problem is other books came out on the Sumerians as well. There was a scholar called Ragozin who did a book called Sumer. And Ragozin, he says that the population in Sumer didn't originate there. They originated in India, but he describes them also as Negroes. So even though he comes with some complicated and convoluted theory, and then you had books such as the Childhood of Art, which was written by an Oxford University Don H.G. Spearing. And this was a book I have to shout out the great Yusef Ben Yochanan, because it was him that found this reference. Same thing, the Sumerians are presented as Negroes. And so what then happened is when modern scholars said Sumeria is where civilization was founded, they had to hope that you had never come across Rawlinson. They had to hope that you had never come across Ragozin. You'd never come across H.G. Spearing, and so on. And then when the physical anthropology started, and they started looking at Sumerian skulls, they described them as hyper-dolichocephalic. A dolichocephalic skull is a long skull. A lot of African skulls are dolichocephalic. I mean, my skull is dolichocephalic, long distance from front to the back. Sumerian skulls are hyper-dolichocephalic. And then people did studies on Sumerian postcranial, which is from the neck downwards, and found out that they were tropically adapted. So they were hot adapted populations and so on. And then with the Elamites is where Iran is today. And the people of Iran, just like the people of Iraq, they're not the original inhabitants, they're conquerors. And the people they conquered over, you could call them the Elamites, you could call them the Susians. And the physical anthropology of the Elamites or the Susians, some people call them Negroes, some people call them Australoids. Australoids means look like the Australian Aborigine.
As a thank you for visiting our website, we are giving you a free copy of our exclusive 100 Black History Facts, which is in fact a taster of our course content. Make sure you leave your email address and we will send it right to you. We hope it inspires you to dig deeper into your history and heritage.
What have we got? So we've got Cushites, we've got Negroes, we've got Australoids. That's who your Sumerians and your Elamites are. Now, what these people contributed to the civilization is these are the first two civilizations in Asia. They're not the first two civilizations in the world, but they are the first two civilizations in Asia. So on the Asian continent, those are the first two. They had a body of writing in cuneiform. They've got monuments. So there's the great ziggurat of Ur, which is still standing. And there's the Chogha-Zambil ziggurat in Iran, still standing. One was built by the Sumerians, one was built by the Elamites. And I do urge everyone, if you can pull up pictures of those two monuments, they are exquisite. And the Chogha-Zambil ziggurat has got a round arch in its structure. And the significance of the round arch is this was supposedly invented by the Romans, but the Elamites had beaten them to it by 1,000 years. So yeah, so there's a lot of history there. What's more, the descendants of the Sumerians, they're called the Marsh Arabs, and I am reliably informed that the Marsh Arabs are to this day Black. And the descendants of the Elamites, they are mixed, but there's clearly a Black component, do you see?
Thanks for clarifying that, because as you mentioned, the whole waters have been muddied, and you go back and forth. And of course, as you are also suggesting, they've been deliberately muddied, because the evidence is certainly there. And, the whole thing continues. And